Deep dives and blue skies. Welcome back to Talking Blue with Nick, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Blue, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find. I am your host, Nick. Today you are listening to episode 85, and it is the very first edition of Recap Time. Today we are recapping opening weekend, the first 3 games of the season. So that is some very exciting stuff. We actually get to talk about real baseball games on this podcast for the first time since Game 7 of the World Series last year. So I can't wait to do that. It was a really exciting first weekend, the first 3 games. Obviously, the Dodgers swept the Arizona Diamondbacks, coming back in all 3 games. There was a lot of really good things to talk about in each game. So we're going to break down all of that. But before we do that, as always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. That's X. That is TikTok. That's Instagram. You can follow myself on X at Nick Talking Ball. Yes, if you've listened before, it's a little bit of a different X name. I changed the name, so it's no longer Talking Blue Nick. It is Nick Talking Ball on X if you want to follow myself. If you are a fan of not just the Dodgers, but all of Major League Baseball, I started a new podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. It's called Baseball Mondays. The first episode dropped a little less than a week ago. It was preview / predictions for the 26th season. So at the time of this recording, Sunday, episode 2 will come out tomorrow, and it will be recapping the entire weekend of Major League Baseball. So if you're into that and you like all things baseball, perfect podcast for you. Like I said, Baseball Mondays. It is a recap show. I'm going to be talking about all things baseball, so that's the perfect place for you. So back to the Dodgers. Really exciting weekend. Obviously, there's a ton of things going on. Opening day, first pitches. Obviously, the Dodgers are the reigning champs, so you got a bunch of celebrations, trophy celebration. Dodgers get their rings. Dodgers wear their gold World Series edition jerseys, which are pretty cool. I got a regular jersey on today. It's a Shohei jersey. I actually have one of the gold edition jerseys. It was the first one that came out in 2021 when they, of course, won in 2020. I have that jersey. It's a Kershaw one. I didn't love the ones they made last year. They were kind of cool, but instead of it being outlined in gold, it was like the Dodger blue part was gold. This year, they kind of went back to what they had the first time around with the outlined gold. They had some cool hats on. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, the Dodger uniform is already like a beautiful jersey. Then you add some sick gold to it, and then it's just going to look even more beautiful. So there's a lot of cool things going on. Opening day this year and the last couple years has been a little funky. It's always going to be on Thursday. But usually most teams play, if not all, on opening days. The last couple of years it's gotten weird with certain the start times. So today being Sunday, it will almost be never during the regular season that we'll get an off day on Sunday, except for maybe during the All-Star break, but I don't even think then. So this will pretty much be the only off day we have on a Sunday until literally November again. So that is a rarity, but the Dodgers did play 3 games, so we're going to get to those. So if you're not aware, if you're new to this podcast, the way we do the pods during the season, we recap each series. I'm going to go through each game individually. I'm just going to talk about like who started, a little bit of the action, give the final score. Then I'm going to talk about that game, give my thoughts on individual performances, the pitchers, and all that kind of stuff, and we'll go through each game. And that'll pretty much be the entire podcast. So let's waste no time and let's go ahead and get into Game 1. Yoshinobu Yamamoto taking on Zach Gallen on opening night, Thursday. It was a night game, opening day, opening night, whatever you want to call it. So scoring got underway. Geraldo Perdomo of the Diamondbacks, a 2-run homer in the 4th inning, puts them up 2-0. A couple innings later, in the 5th inning, with 2 runners on, Andy Pages hits the first home run of the year for the Dodgers. A 3-run homer, jumps them on top, puts them up 3-2. Later in that inning, with the bases loaded and 2 outs, a Will Smith infield single kind of down the right field line. Carlos Santana made a nice diving stop but couldn't get an out of it. Dodgers go up 4-2. Then in the bottom of the 7th, with Shohei Ohtani on first base and moving on the pitch, Kyle Tucker gets his first hit as a Dodger. He doubles into right center field. Shohei comes around to score. This is a great sign. Right after that, Mookie Betts singles up the middle, makes it 6-2 Dodgers. Then Will Smith would pretty much put this game to bed. A 2-run homer, his first homer of the year, puts the Dodgers up 8-2, and that is the final score. The Dodgers win by a score of 8-2. Yamamoto, like I said, he started 6 innings pitched. Blake Trinan for 1, Will Klein for 1, and then Tanner Scott finished out the game. No save opportunity, 1 inning, and that is the game. Great game. I watched it from start to finish. Like I said, all the ceremony stuff before. This game wasn't the ring night. This was a lot of the trophy stuff. Obviously, it was on NBC. Clayton Kershaw was one of the announcers, not in the booth, but he was down kind of in the stands next to the Dodgers dugout, which was kind of crazy to think, like, the first game of no Clayton Kershaw in however many years, he was still at the game and he was broadcasting it, and he actually did a pretty good job. I actually liked him on the booth. He's a really smart guy. So, like I said, a great game. Yamamoto, we'll start with him. He was actually pretty solid early on. After he gave up that home run, I was a little bit concerned that we weren't going to have a great Yamamoto start to talk about. But he did rally and actually put up some good numbers. 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, which, like I said, both came on that home run. No walks, which is great. 6 strikeouts, 16 whiffs in the game, so he was getting a ton of swings and misses. So again, if you're new to this podcast, I'm really good at breaking down players, specifically pitchers, and I usually like to dive into the pitchers' numbers that start. So Yamamoto, when you take a look at his pitch usage, he actually did throw more splitters than four-seam fastballs. That's something that stood out to me, 31% splitter, 22% four-seamer. So he actually threw a lot of splitters, and it was noticeable throughout the game. He was throwing a ton of them. A couple things that also stand out to me about Yamamoto's outing. He mixed in sinkers and sliders. The sinker is not crazy for Yamamoto. He did throw that pitch last year. He didn't really throw a ton of sliders in 2025. When he came up in 2024, that was a pitch that he used. Again, not a ton. His 3 most often used pitches are always going to be his splitter, his four-seamer, and his curveball, with a good mix of sinkers and cutters. He did use that slider in 2024. But then I think when he had the shoulder injury and came back in 2025, he kind of steered away from that pitch, didn't use it as much. But it's always been a pitch to me that I've been interested to see if he'll bring into the fold, especially because Yamamoto being a splitter ball guy and using that splitter, and it's one of the best pitches in the game, and it's definitely his best pitch, his out pitch. Because of that, he dominates left-handed hitters. He's actually a reverse splits pitcher, where traditionally, usually pitchers dominate the same handedness. So if you're right-handed, usually you have better numbers against right-handed hitters, and same thing for lefties. Yamamoto is the opposite because he's a splitter pitcher and he throws that pitch a ton to lefties, of course, and it's kind of a pitch that's tailor-made for the opposite handedness. He gets lefties out even better than at a better rate than he does righties. So the slider has always been a pitch for him that could be a really, really useful pitch for right-handed hitters. And like I said, he threw a good amount in this game. He got 2 whiffs on that pitch, only threw 7%. He only threw 7 sliders, so he didn't throw a ton, but he did throw him. He threw a total of 6 different pitches, and that's just really cool to see. And then what really stands out is the way that he was using his sinker. If you watched in this game, he actually threw a fair amount of sinkers to left-handed hitters, which is a thing that he's almost never done throughout his career. He's really only used the sinker against right-handed hitters to get in on them, in on the right-handed hitters, soft contact, jam hitters. It's, traditionally what sinkers are used for. He used this pitch against left-handed hitters. He threw a couple good ones. One to Carlos Santana. He threw a couple of front hip sinkers. So Corey Kluber, that was something he was always really good at back in the day. Nowadays, Logan Webb is probably the best at that in baseball. You throw the sinker and you start it at the left-handed hitter's front hip, obviously if you're a right-handed pitcher, and the pitch kind of starts at the hitter and then breaks back over the plate for a strike. And a lot of times you can get a lot of really good strike-looking strikeouts. And I just think that would be really cool if Yamamoto can implement that into his arsenal, because he already dominates left-handed hitters, so he doesn't really need another out pitch. But obviously, when you're when you're one of the better pitchers in the game, you're always trying to find ways to get better. So I'll be interested to see how Yamamoto, if he continues to implement that into his repertoire and his just the way he goes about it. Does he actually use that sinker? Sometimes Tyler Glasnow, as he's developed with the Dodgers, I've noticed him use that pitch. I saw him in 2024 start to implement that front hip sinker. The Dodgers have never had a ton of guys that use that pitch. They usually prefer guys to throw four-seam fastballs. They haven't had a ton of sinker ball pitchers in their day. And even the guys that have thrown sinkers have never really done it that way, throwing inside sinkers to the opposite-handedness. So, interesting stuff. There was he threw a total of, I'm looking at the numbers right here, he threw 5 sinkers to right-handed hitters. It says right here that he only threw 1 to left-handed hitters, but I thought that was wrong. I thought that he threw a little bit more than that. But anyways, that was pretty cool to see. Yamamoto, he pitched pretty good again. 6 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. That's pretty solid with the 6 strikeouts. He did, like I said, 16 whiffs is a lot of whiffs. 53% whiff rate on the splitter. So the splitter was explosive and getting a ton of whiffs. Over half of the splitters that he threw got swings, generated a swing and miss. And that pitch pretty much got the majority of his whiffs. The last 2 things we'll talk about, the bullpen with this game was great. Blake Trinan, Will Klein, Tanner Scott. Again, obviously the game got a little out of hand at the end. But in terms of how the guys looked, I talked about it before, and it'll be something to keep an eye on all year, is Blake Trinan and how does he look even at his older age. I was very enthused to see the average fastball in this game, 97 miles an hour. So the sinker was looking good. The sweeper was looking really good. He got 4 whiffs in the game. He actually threw, out of the 3 sweepers that he threw that got swings, all of them produced a whiff. So that's great. He looked good. Will Klein as well threw in this game and looked good, and he looked good over the opening weekend. And then Tanner Scott, again, another guy that's looked good so far. And we'll get to the bullpen at some point because they were absolutely fantastic during this weekend, and they were kind of the main reason that the Dodgers were able to win, minus obviously the comeback wins and the offense, the late inning offense. And then lastly, Andy Paz and Will Smith. Andy Paz had 2 hits in this game. Obviously, one was the home run. And then the other, I forget if it was a double down the right field line or if it was just a single. But he also made a really, really great sliding catch in this game as well. So just more things that you want to see from Andy Paz. A little bit more pop. Hopefully we could see some better plate discipline. That's really something that will take Andy Paz to the next level. And then continue the electric, just outstanding defense that he played last year in center field. So that's great. Will Smith, he had the late inning home run, 2 hits. He also had another home run in this series that we'll get to. So a great opening game. The offense was pretty good. 10 hits, 5 walks, only 4 strikeouts. That's something that I hope we continue to see, is not a ton of strikeouts, especially bringing Kyle Tucker into the fold, who's a guy who doesn't strike out. Mookie Betts, another guy that doesn't strike out. Hopefully we get to see a lot more of that. So yeah, great opening win. Dodgers go to 1-0. We'll go ahead and go to Game 2. We'll keep this moving. Game 2, Emmett Sheehan versus Kyle Nelson of the Diamondbacks. We'll go to that game. Similarly to the first game, the Dodgers fell down 2-0 in the second inning. An Alek Thomas double put them up 1-0. Kyle Tucker and Alex Freeland combined for a nice relay to cut down the runner at home plate. So just 1-0. But then in the third inning, Ketel Marte takes Sheehan deep. So the Diamondbacks go up 2-0. In the third inning, Alex Freeland, we'll get to this after the game, but Alex Freeland gets the start. A lot of Dodger fans were upset about the way the Dodgers handled Ha-Sung Kim, and he wasn't on the roster. Alex Freeland is. He homers. And I think it was his first at bat of the season. First home run of the year. He cuts the deficit in half. Later in that inning, Mookie Betts homers to right center field. A 3-run homer, actually, so that's great. So it's 4-2 Dodgers. We go ahead into the 4th inning. This is when Emmett Sheehan got knocked out of the game. Another Alek Thomas double would tie up the game. So now it's 4-4. Later on, the game would remain 4-4 all the way to the bottom of the 8th. Kyle Tucker delivers, puts the Dodgers on top, makes it 5-4. And then Edwin Diaz actually came into the 9th inning to close out the game, get his first save as a Dodger. The Dodgers win by a score of 5-4. It goes Emmett Sheehan for 3.1, Jack Dreyer for 1 2/3, Ben Kasparius for 2/3 of an inning, Tanner Scott for 1/3, just 1 out, Alex Vessier for 1 inning, Edgardo Henriquez for 1 inning, and then, of course, Edwin Diaz for 1 inning. And like I said, it was his first save. So a ton of pitchers pitched in this game. A lot of bullpen guys came in after Emmett Sheehan. That is where we'll start. Emmett Sheehan didn't look too great in this game. His final line, 3.1 innings pitched, 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. So the early thing to talk about with Emmett Sheehan is his velocity. So it was talked about throughout spring. He didn't make a ton of spring starts, kind of got ramped up a little bit later. But early on in spring, his velocity was down a little bit. I think he was only averaging around like 93 miles an hour. The Dodgers didn't seem too concerned about it. I think in his last spring start, the velocity came back up a little bit. So they seemed to be fine and not really seemed to be concerned with it. Early in this start, his velocity looked fine. He was sitting like 94 to 96. But as the game progressed, his velocity definitely dropped a tick. And if you take a look, he only averaged 94 miles an hour, which I believe is a little bit down from what he averaged last year. In 2025, he averaged around 95 and a half. So we'll have to keep an eye on that in his next couple starts. I don't think it's too concerning. Hopefully it's not any kind of potential injury or anything like that. It could just be related to him coming off of the innings total that he threw last year, pretty much the most innings he's thrown in his career, considering that he's still a young guy and doesn't have a ton of innings under his belt in his full major league career. But really what was worse, or not worse, but just what was really a bigger deal in my eyes, which was just the way he looked overall on the mound. Emmett Sheehan, early on in the game, looked great because the fastball, like I said, the velocity was good, and it was looking really good at the top of the zone. Sheehan is a guy that gets pretty good induced vertical break, something I've talked about on this podcast a ton. It's just a metric that is like a StatCast thing, or just a metric that can kind of tell you how much spin the pitcher puts on the ball. So 18 inches of induced vertical break, again, it just means that the pitch stays on plane well. And a lot of guys who have great IVB numbers, it almost gives that illusion that the ball rises. So when you have a fastball, a four-seam fastball that has really good induced vertical break, like I've talked about, Alex Vessier, Jack Dreyer, Ben Kasparius, when you put that pitch at the top of the zone, it makes it difficult for guys to get on top of that pitch. And Sheehan early in this game had that release point on lock. He was getting a couple of really good fastballs upstairs to Ketel Marte, Carlos Santana, Corbin Carroll, and a lot of the guys were chasing pitch out of the zone. He gets a really good amount of chase normally, swings and misses out of the strike zone. A lot of times it's because of that four-seamer. Now, what was noticeable to me on TV was the amount of changeups that Sheehan was throwing early in this game. So 43% fastball, 35% changeup. All right, so he threw 29 changeups in only three and 1/3 innings pitched. He threw a lot of changeups. It was very noticeable to me. And Sheehan has the kind of changeup that isn't necessarily like, a guy that throws like mid-90s like him. You would kind of expect his changeup to be traditionally like 88 miles an hour, 89 miles an hour, 87. His changeup in this game was averaging 85 miles an hour, and his changeup is one of those like true butterfly effect kind of changeups. Like It has a lot of movement, and it kind of looks even slower on TV when you're watching it than 85 miles an hour. It kind of looks like a really slow changeup, which is not bad. That's fine. You can have a changeup like that, especially for left-handed hitters, and it has a lot of movement. But with Sheehan, a lot of times when he is throwing a ton of changeups, a lot of times he has a tendency to let the pitch kind of stays up in the zone, which can be a disaster at times. Sometimes it works for him, and he almost can use like a high changeup to his advantage, where a lot of hitters kind of give up on that pitch, thinking that it's going to, it's like a high fastball for a ball, and then the pitch kind of drops a little bit and clips the top part of the strike zone. But using a high changeup as a pitch, which I'm not saying Sheehan uses that, like he's aiming for the top part of the strike zone. I'm sure it's just that the pitch pops out of his hand, and sometimes he just gets lucky. But when you're using when you have a changeup that's staying up in the middle of the strike zone, that is just not a great, that can be a potential disaster, because it's just a 85 mile an hour pitch that's up in the zone that's just begging to get hit. I'm pretty sure that both doubles that Alek Thomas hit were off of changeups that were left up. His off-speed pitches were elite last year. His slider and his changeup were great. So I don't think that Sheehan needs to throw less changeups or anything, but it just was a little eye-opening to me that with his velocity dipping a little bit, and then he was really relying heavily on the changeup. Like, he was throwing a lot of first-pitch changeups. He was throwing it to right-handed hitters a lot, which, again, it's a great pitch, so there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, Sheehan's got an electric fastball. He's got to find like a little bit of a better release point on that pitch to get it down in the strike zone. And I don't want him to rely too heavy on the changeup, especially when he's got a great slider. They were talking about it on the broadcast that I guess in spring training he had a much better feel for the changeup than he did the slider this year. The slider, he only threw 16% in this game, only threw 13 sliders. So maybe that is a reason to why he went to the changeup more often. He did have 13 whiffs in the game, and like I said, early in the game, his fastball was looking pretty good. So it could just be a mechanical thing. It could just be early in the season. We'll see how it all plays out. Hopefully his velocity can kind of hold up throughout a start. His next time through, which will be against the Nationals next weekend. So we'll see. I still expect big things from Sheehan. If it wasn't for just a couple changeups that he left out over the plate, he probably is able to get through 4 or 5 innings and have a pretty decent finishing line. So after that, the bullpen was amazing in this game. They obviously, Jack Dreyer, Kasparius, Tanner Scott, Vesia, Henriquez, and then obviously Edwin Diaz for the save, all pitched in the from the 4th inning on, and no guys allowed an earned run. There was only 2 walks allowed, one from Ben Kasparius, one from Edwin Diaz, a lot of strikeouts. So the bullpen was great, which is obviously huge when you have a guy come out of the game early like that. And so far, the bullpen's really great. It has been really great. And again, I'm going to give some numbers after the 3rd game that kind of gives them that credit. Dodgers didn't do a ton in this game offensively, only 4 hits, but they obviously did enough in the end to, with the bullpen holding it down and keeping the Diamondbacks off the board. They were obviously able to do enough at the end of the game to push across 1 run. And then the last guy I'll just talk about is Alex Freeland. I wanted to give him some credit. 2 extra base hits, obviously the home run, and then he also had a double in this game, and he was the go-ahead run that scored to put the Dodgers ahead. I wasn't able to comment on this because of the timing of my last podcast, but of course, Hae-Sung Kim was left off the opening day roster for Alex Freeland, which wasn't too surprising for me. There was obviously, if you're on Twitter, huge Twitter storm. A lot of fans were upset about that. They were comparing spring training numbers. I think that Kim was hitting well over 300, and Freeland was hitting like under 200. But, I talked about this before, kind of going into spring training, and, one of the things to look forward to was the second baseman competition and who's going to get a chance to make the opening day roster. Obviously, it ended up being Alex Freeland. I kind of told you guys this. I really believe that the Dodgers, if they were being honest, they believe more in Alex Freeland. like Freeland was kind of like a legit top prospect. He was nothing like insane. He wasn't a crazy high prospect, but a legit top prospect who has a higher ceiling than Kim, because he has a real opportunity to be like a pretty good big league hitter. He's supposed to be a really good defender. He's athletic. He could play right now at the big league level. He could play shortstop. He could play second. He could play third. He's a switch hitter. And the thing that Freeland has going for him is that even at his young age and limited big league time, he has elite plate discipline right now. And obviously as a young guy, that could even improve. He has really, really great chase numbers. He doesn't swing at pitches out of the strike zone, which just means that he's going to walk a lot. And even if the bat doesn't come around to where he is, consistently making hard contact or just making contact in general, maybe he has some swing and miss concerns. Whatever happens with Freeland, what he's going to bring is great plate discipline, which is going to just lead to more opportunities to get on base, especially hitting down at the bottom of the order. If he's a guy that's going to be walking a lot, that means that when the lineup turns around for Ohtani and Kyle Tucker, there's going to be more opportunities for guys on base. And when you compare that to Ha-Seong Kim, I just think that the Dodgers have a lot of concerns about Kim's swing and his approach. He swings and misses a lot. He doesn't necessarily, at least at this point throughout his young career, he hasn't made a lot of consistent contact or hard contact. He chases. He doesn't really walk. So they sent him down to AAA to continue to work on his swing. I think he had like 5 hits the other day, so that's great. He'll definitely get a chance at some point, and he'll be called up, and it'll probably be sometime in April, honestly. It won't be long until we get to see Kim. He also is going to get to work on his versatility. He's going to play some outfield, some second base. He'll probably even play some shortstop, maybe third. They're going to be able to work on his versatility. Maybe they'll even get him time in left field, and maybe he could be a late inning defensive replacement with Teoscar Hernandez in left field. So Kim is always going to be a work in progress, but I just feel like the Dodgers kind of show a little bit of their true colors. And it doesn't mean that they don't like Kim and don't believe in Kim. I just think that they feel like Alex Freeland has a little bit of a higher ceiling, and he's a little bit like big league ready right now to be the second baseman. So that's all it is. It's nothing against Ha-Seong Kim, and he'll definitely get his chance at some point. But it's great that Freeland got to show a little bit of his tools. He's very athletic, the switch hitter, and like I said, the plate discipline. And obviously having 2 extra base hits in your first start, that's pretty great. He's going to get a lot of run against right-handed pitching to see what he can do. The last game before we wrap things up, Game 3, which was Saturday night, Tyler Glasnow versus Eduardo Rodriguez, the left-hander of the Diamondbacks. We'll go to that game. Again, just like the other 3 games, the Dodgers fell behind in this game. Pavin Smith with a RBI single in the first inning. Then in the third inning, Corbin Carroll, a sac fly to center field, puts them up 2-0. In the bottom of the 6th inning, Freddie Freeman finally gets on the board. He had been making a lot of hard contact, but hadn't had much to show for it. He doubles down the left field line to make it 2-1. Then all the way to the bottom of the 8th inning. This is pretty nice. Will Smith with 2 outs in the 8th inning. The Dodgers down a run. A 2-run homer to dead center to put the Dodgers ahead to jump them on top. Will Smith, pretty sick. It was not only his bobblehead day, but his birthday. So he homers on his bobblehead birthday to put the Dodgers ahead. The score would hold. Edwin Diaz came in for his second save as a Dodger, his second save of this series. Tyler Glasnow, then Alex Vesia, Will Klein, and then Edwin Diaz for the save. So we'll start with Tyler Glasnow. I was unfortunately not able to watch this game live, because a lot of times a box score or even like the pitch data doesn't tell the whole picture if you don't really watch the game live. Like I got to watch Sheehan and I got to watch Yamamoto. Glasnow, if you take a look at his final line, 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. If you look at the little bit of the metrics, like I said earlier, he only had 7 whiffs, which is very low for Glasnow. And his fastball was averaging 97.5, 97.7, which is I believe is pretty similar to what he averaged a year ago. So if you took a look at those metrics at first, you would think that he actually didn't pitch that great. But 6 innings pitched and 2 earned runs, you're going to take that every day as a manager. And just the Dodgers will always take that. 6 strikeouts. Like I said, though, the 7 whiffs is really low for Glasnow. Glasnow usually easily gets into double digits, and he's more normally around like 15, 16. He had 4 whiffs on the curveball. He had 2 on his sinker. He didn't get any on his slider. So, again, I didn't watch the start, but I would have to imagine that his slider, he just didn't have a great feel for it because that's usually a pitch that does well for him. And he really didn't generate many whiffs at all on his four-seam fastball. So, for whatever reason, the Diamondbacks were just putting the ball in play on Glasnow, which is not something that he normally is accustomed to, but still a pretty solid start for him and not a bad start, first start of him for the season. What we'll get to now is what was pretty much the highlight, I guess you would say, of this entire series, because there wasn't really a ton of things to talk about. There wasn't really like any individual offensive standouts. Like I said, Will Smith was really good. Andy Paz did some good things. A lot of guys did some nice things, but nobody really had like a crazy weekend. So the bullpen, which is just great to see because this was pretty much the Dodgers' biggest weakness last year. 11.1 innings pitched, 11 and a third innings pitched this weekend. 5 hits, 0 earned runs, only 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. So they didn't allow any earned runs all weekend. So every guy that was featured, nobody allowed an earned run. Edwin Diaz obviously got 2 saves. Will Klein pitched a lot. Tanner Scott, Vesia, those guys had a couple of appearances. Blake Trinan, Edgardo Henriquez, Ben Gasparius, Jack Dreyer. We got to see all those guys pitch. Nobody allowed an earned run. And what's also great is that the walks were down. Another thing that the Dodgers kind of struggled with last year is a lot of guys who would come in, walk hitters, and that would just create a lot of madness. So that's great to see. We know the struggles last year. There's a lot of guys that looked really good, especially Will Klein. Those are guys that I'm really itching to do some breakdowns on. This is going to be a pretty quick pod because, like I said, not a ton to get to, and it's obviously the first series of the week of the year, and usually I like to do a lot of breakdowns and what have guys been doing lately and what have guys been doing as opposed to last year. So as soon as we start to get some more info and just the numbers and metrics start to pile up from games being played, we'll really get to do some breakdowns. But and then the last thing, like I said, Will Smith, pretty sick that he gets to homer on his bobblehead day, which was also his birthday, and it was the go-ahead winning, game-winning home run, basically. And he's off to a great start. He's pretty much been their best hitter, throughout these first 3 games. 2 home runs. Not a ton of average so far from the Dodgers. They've kind of not lived and died by the home run, but the home run that Andy Paz hit got them back in that game on Thursday, and then Will Smith put the finishing touches on it on the game with the home run later in that game, and then Mookie Betts again got them right back in and actually put them ahead with that 3-run homer on Friday. And then Will Smith hit the game-changing homer in this game, which is great. I mean, if you out-slug, if you out-homer your opponent, you're going to win the game 80% of the time. That's a lot of how the numbers work. Again, you don't always want to be too home run reliant. You do need to be able to string rallies together, walk, get on base. The thing that I also like from the Dodgers offense so far is they have not been striking out a ton. They did have 6 strikeouts in the third game, but they only had that was on the pitching side. Or no, that was on the offensive side. 6 strikeouts on Saturday night. On Friday night, they only had 5 strikeouts, and then on opening night, they only had 4 strikeouts. So that's great. So there was a lot of guys putting the ball in play, getting on base with some walks. I like that. So that's pretty much all my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pretty good weekend series, pretty great opening series. A lot of good things, obviously. Dodgers are 3-0. That's great. We'll see if they can. How far can they take the undefeated start? Last year, if you remember, they started the year 8-0, so that was pretty cool. We'll see how long they can do that this year. Upcoming this week. All right, we got the Guardians in town starting on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then over the weekend, the Dodgers will travel across the country to Washington, D.C. to take on the Nationals. I would imagine that they'll probably do their White House visit, which is what the reigning champs always do. But what I'm really looking forward to, Roki Sasaki. We're always going to be on Sasaki watch. Again, another thing I didn't really get to comment on my last podcast, Sasaki did make his final spring training start, which actually came in the Freeway Series against the Angels, and he continued to look really, really bad. So I want to save a lot of my thoughts because I want to just see how he looks in his first game. Like I said, that'll be Monday night against the Guardians, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully Sasaki can just find a little bit of consistency and just give himself a chance and get the ball close to the strike zone. Because a lot of the things I have not liked with Sasaki so far, and this is not even on the field, this is off the field. Every spring training start this year that he didn't do good, which is pretty much all of them, the only time he pitched good was like the only time there was no cameras, which was on the backfields against the White Sox in a minor league spring training game. Every spring training start that he had, he would allow a lot of walks, not have great command, and then in his post-game presser, when the media always talks to the starting pitcher after the game, he would kind of just always say like, oh, my mechanics were bad, my mechanics were off, and that was kind of why I fell apart, which is I'm not saying that he's lying, that's true, but you can't always just go to, oh, my mechanics were off. Well, at some point you got to fix your mechanics. And sometimes you got to show a little bit of fight. Dave Roberts, I think, actually said this after one of his starts. We need to see better compete, which is, again, I don't want to go on a tangent. A lot of times managers kind of say stuff like that throughout the regular season, which is a lot of just nothingness, a lot of nothing quotes. But it is true. You can't just go out there and be like, oh, my mechanics are off, so I guess I'm just going to walk 5 and get pulled in the third inning. You got to find a little bit of that compete, and I hope a lot of what Dave Roberts said and what a lot of the things the Dodgers are trying to preach to him resonates, and I hope it all comes together and it culminates. I hope it comes together into a really nice first start against the Guardians. So that's what I'm going to be looking forward to seeing. Then, of course, after that, it'll be followed by Ohtani. We'll get to see his first regular season start. I'm really glad that we don't have to deal with any funny business, slow playing Ohtani. They're going to let him make his first start of the year the first time around, and I don't even think he's going to have many restrictions. They'll probably let him go 5 to 6 innings if he looks good, and then we'll see Yamamoto pitch again on Wednesday, and then they'll be off Thursday before they go to Washington. So that is what we are looking forward to, especially Sasaki. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do and really antsy to see, and that we'll be recapping that on Thursday, good or bad, so I hope it's good. That is all I have for you guys. I hope you guys appreciate it, and I hope you guys liked it. It was a really fun weekend and a really fun podcast, and I'm just really excited for the season to get going. Opening day is just the best time when you've had 3-4 months of nothingness. It's really the best time when you're a baseball fan. So again, if you guys are baseball fans, not just Dodger fans, if you like the things I have to say about the game, you can listen to my brand new podcast, Baseball Mondays with Nick. I do the podcast right here. I'm going to be recapping the previous week in Major League Baseball. That'll come out tomorrow again. So I'm going to have the links and all that in my description below. As always, you can get this podcast at Talking Blue on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back to recap the Guardians and the Dodgers later this week.